Emmanuel Macron leads Marine Le Pen by 10 points in the polls. Is it possible for Marine Le Pen to win, and if so, how?
Well, as you rightly mentioned, it's only about polls. There's no certainty about whether or not the considerably rapid advance of the president since the debate, which happened last Wednesday, in which Emmanuel Macron tended to have bypassed the candidates. You're speaking about one poll which gives 55% to Emmanuel Macron, 45% to Marine Le Pen. We're not very sure that this advance will be lasting till the end of just before the polls. As you very well know, the polls tend to have misguided a certain number of certainties during the last presidential election. What is a certainty, though, is that the considerable advance that President Macron had last time, we were speaking about 65% and 35% to Marine Le Pen, has narrowed to only 10% of difference, which is already a victory for Marine Le Pen, as she has never had as much voters in capability of voting for her. If she does 43, 44, 44, 45, 46, 47%, it's a huge amount of voters. But the problem is that she will not do a lot with these voters, as the presidential campaign is not based on the same legitimacy of the legislative campaign. She only has 8 members of parliament when she represents the second political party in France, or not to say doing weighting almost the political weight of the presidential party.
So you're saying even if that 22% that voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon in the first round, even if they decide not to come out and vote and they don't put their vote towards Macron, Le Pen would still miss out on the presidency?
Yes, because first of all, the voters of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, more or less 22-23%, 9 to 10 million of voters, are not totally following the directives that Jean-Luc Mélenchon has issued. First of all, he said that no vote should go for Marine Le Pen. He did not say vote for Emmanuel Macron. That gives 3 options. Either you vote for Emmanuel Macron, either you vote for Marine Le Pen, either you don't vote, or you vote blank, or how do you say in French, vote blanc, which would be a white vote. I don't know how you translate that in English. If you look at the polls, more or less 33% only of the voters of Jean-Luc Mélenchon will vote for Emmanuel Macron. 27% will vote for Marine Le Pen, and the rest will not go to the not cast a ballot or put a white ballot, which now, since 2017, are taken in account. So it's not sure that the votes of Jean-Luc Mélenchon will help Emmanuel Macron, and for another reason. Jean-Luc Mélenchon has absolutely the capacity of being a key player, whether Emmanuel Macron or Marine Le Pen wins the election, because he's the third man, and of course the importance is not the presidency, it is the legislative elections, which will only take place in 2 months. Therefore there's a huge gap, and I think a time in which the leftist populist Jean-Luc Mélenchon will take advantage to strengthen his political offer, and this is why just a few hours after the vote, Monday, there will be a huge meeting amongst the left party, Socialist Party, Ecologist Party, Communist Party, and Insoumis Party, and of course that could be very important, because if you take the figures, left reunited at 33% of the votes, right united, which would mean Éric Zemmour's votes plus the extremist vote of Marine Le Pen. Of course, it's something which is not possible, but I mean, concretely it's not possible. Intellectually, one could argue that if there is a united front amongst the progressive voters, there can be a united front among the conservative voters, from Éric Zemmour, to Valérie Pécresse voters, or of course taking in consideration that inside the Conservative parties there's a strong ultra-conservative wing. So it's more or less 32%. And then the rest puts the presidential party in minority, if you take in consideration this.
Which then means the president can't do, it's very difficult to pass laws and to get stuff done in the assembly. Is that right?
As we are speaking, there's no chance that, in the country of 2017, the presidential party has all of the members of parliament that he won. Last time, there's 577 MPs. To have a majority, you need 289. He had 340. But that was because there was a huge, let's say, dynamic after the presidential election, which happened 1 month after. This time, the dynamics is not there. It's 2 months after. And of course, all of these opponents have won in legitimacy. Eric Zemmour, but Jean-Luc Mélenchon is a stronger opponent than he was in 2017. Marine Le Pen is now more eager to believe that she may never be president, but she can be the key opponent. And of course, one would argue that if we are in this situation, that would mean that there would not be any majority possible. And therefore, you would have what in French constitution we call apparentement, in which political parties make bargains.
Right.
Socialists, Greens, Insoumis, Communists. Conservative, eventual Zemmour voters, of course not with National Front. And of course the position of the president is very hard because the centrists will gain weight, but not that much. There were 44 members of Modem Party. They can maybe have something like 50 or 60. The presidential party, I think, will diminish by half. That means it will not have 340, but maybe 150, 160. So he cannot govern by himself. He has to have coordination with others.
So it sounds like you're more interested, or it is more interesting and more significant, the legislative elections that come in a few months' time, really. If Macron probably wins on Sunday, he's going to need as much control as he can of that assembly, and if Marine Le Pen wins, it's the same. That's where the key deal making will come, in order to give the president some power in making laws.
Well, under the French constitution, the power belongs normally to the prime minister. He is the one who leads the action of the government, which is nominated on the principle and the core of the results of the legislative elections. During the Fifth Republic, in every case, the presidential party was the one who gave a majority to the president. But now things are changing. First of all, there's more time in between the second round of the presidential election and the first round of the legislative election. So a lot of things can happen in 2 months. There's an international crisis, there's still the pandemic which is coming back, and there's a huge amount of, let's say, disconnection amongst the voters of Emmanuel Macron, which will be voting for him, not for him, but against Marine Le Pen.
Yeah.
That does not make a policy. That does not make a legitimacy. And then there's another issue. And I think Emmanuel Macron will be working on this perspective. Is to say, as we are in an exceptional arc of crisis, pandemics, economical impact of the war in Ukraine, what can we add?
Cost of living,
let's say disruption between citizens and politics. One could argue that everywhere in Europe you have technocratic governments in order to cope with the urgency of the situation. This is the case in Italy. This is in a way the case in Belgium. In Germany, it's not a technical government, but it is a coalition government with, let's say, from A to Z, from the liberal perspective of the FDP to a more harsh, let's say, progressive vision of the society with the Greens and, of course, the Social Democrats. One could argue that Emmanuel Macron, in order to avoid having to govern with someone who is not from his party, either from right or left, may argue and say, I'm going to dissolve the National Assembly right away. I'm going to take in account the withdrawal of my Prime Minister. Jean Castex has said that he was going to give his, how do you say in English, démission, he was going to resign just a few hours after the election. So one could argue that there is this possibility of naming a technocratic government under the auspices of someone which name has come a lot these recent hours, this recent day, which is Christine Lagarde, the head of the Central European Bank. Yeah. So one could argue if we have a technocratic government, this will block the dynamics of the elections as they're going to happen. But one thing is sure is that there's a bigger way and there's a bigger path for Jean-Luc Mélenchon in order to cluster this socialist, or let's say extreme left dynamics than in the right, because the right is confronted, well, the conservative side of French politics, or conservative landscape, is due to tackle a question which has never been considered possible during the last 30 years, which would be to have a Republican conservative party, liberal, let's say, make an alliance with its major opponent, which is extreme right. But again, the reality could, of course, totally blur the system. This is why Eric Zemmour, who has totally vanished from the presidential election, of course, as he only made 7%, more or less 7%, is calling for a united front of the Conservatives against Emmanuel Macron. But again, I don't see that possible to this extent. So on these issues, she said that she will kick them out. Or, of course, she doesn't say that, but she means it, saying that French post workers would be allowed, but not the foreigners. So it would be very difficult to, on a bilateral manner, coping with Poland, coping with the ones who are furnishing most of the Romanians or Bulgarians. It would be very difficult on a bilateral relations manner. Then there would be the hard part, which would be the foreign policy that we would follow inside the European Union or inside NATO. Marine Le Pen, on the contrary of Emmanuel Macron, has said she was going to revisit our partnership inside NATO. Not get out of NATO, but get out of the integrated military command, in which we came back in 2009. This is very important, as we would therefore block or put in danger the unity of NATO against Russia. And then our NATO partners will not follow us on that, because Marine Le Pen overall has a more, let's say, complicit, or let's say more disponibility to speak with Vladimir Putin than any other European leader. Even more than Emmanuel Macron, which already is not understood by some of his partners in his will to maintain the political dialogue. And then there would be the relations with Germany and the relations with the United States and Great Britain. The cooperation with Great Britain would be as, let's say, unfriendly. It would be unfriendly as it would be with the United States, based on the fact that France has always seen Great Britain as an adversary when it comes to its robust, sovereign foreign policy. And again, it's a bit awkward because Marine Le Pen wants to rebuild the sovereignty of France, but she knows that the sovereignty of France at one point will be in contradiction with the sovereignty of Great Britain, or the renewal of the sovereignty in Great Britain, in Indo-Pacific, in Africa, when it comes to having a more disrupted relation with the United States that you have. And therefore, and if we were to be more eager to have a less transatlantic relation, that would abide, or that would implicate the fact that we are more distant when Great Britain when it comes to foreign policy, and of course, as Great Britain is out of the European Union as well. On the second hand, there will be the question of the migrants. I think we would kick out all of the migrants, or let me put that in a more direct way, we would hand over to you all of the migrants that we are keeping on the French territory in Calais, and we would say, okay, as they want to go to Great Britain, then let them go to Great Britain. Then this would
well, that would definitely start a big that would be problems.
War.
Yeah.
Well, we already saw that a few months ago,
yeah.
when already Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron were arguing whether or not France should be more eager to impeach the migrants from crossing the channel.
Yeah.
And it would be as well, and it would be, I think, even more difficult as the agenda would see now the big numbers of migrants coming from Afghanistan, because Afghanistan was 6 months ago. Now they're arriving in Europe, now they're arriving in France, and I see Marine Le Pen again, okay, cross the channel. It would open a very difficult momentum with Great Britain. And the last point would be the question of Marine Le Pen and the rest of the world. How does she see or foresee the role of France or the legitimacy of France? Of course, when it comes to dealing with China, when it comes to discussing with Russia, or even discussing with our close partners as the African continent, the African continent, France alone does not speak out as loudly as it used to be in the past. And therefore, if we were to speak without the European Union, if we were to speak to China only on a France-China perspective, we would definitely not be in capacity to discuss on an equal level, even though Marine Le Pen says that political will is stronger than economical or geopolitical reality. And she abides by the fact that she's more pragmatic than idealistic. But again, international relations is a mix of both.
And just finally, very quickly, would you bet your house on a Macron victory on Sunday night?
Yeah, I think I could bet my ass on that, because mathematically or arithmetically, I don't see the number of votes sufficient to counter Emmanuel Macron. For let's say 3 reasons. I can find more, but I will limit to 3. First of all, Marine Le Pen was definitely not at the level that she could have been, and that some would have expected her to be on the presidential debate. The polls show it. I don't like Emmanuel Macron by any means, but I have to agree that he was bigger, he was stronger, he was more prepared, and he gave the impression of its awareness, of the understanding of what was happening in France, in Europe, in the world. So she didn't win the debate. She didn't lose, but she didn't win.
She did better than 2017, but didn't win.
Yes, but you know, a presidential debate, if you win, you can have 2 or 3 points. And if she had been better than Emmanuel Macron, things would have changed. It didn't happen. That's the first assumption. Second assumption is based on the fact that there's a huge fright of something that we do not know. We do not know how France will look if Marine Le Pen is president. And this is an important issue, because France needs, let's say the French voters or the French society is very conservative. It's not right. They do not like change. They want legitimacy. They want continuation. If we wake up on the 25 with Marine Le Pen, we do not know how France will go. And I think this is something that will block a certain number of voters, saying, okay, we don't like Emmanuel Macron. He was not very agile and he was very stubborn in the way he tackled the pandemics, but we know where he wants to go. We may not follow him, but we know precisely where he wants to go. And again, people would say, this is my third argument, it's not important that Emmanuel Macron is president. He will not have the capacity to govern on the basis of its policy, of its program. This is why no one really read the program of Macron, because we know that he won't achieve it. And the people are just saying we are voting for Emmanuel Macron for 2 reasons, because he is the opponent of Marine Le Pen, and because, again, he is chairing the European Union. This is the last point, and it's, I think, the overall of my conclusion, of my perception, is the fact that the president that will be elected or re-elected, we still have 2 months to sort of accelerate what has not been achieved on behalf of the crisis which happened with the 24th of February invasion of Ukraine. We have 2 months to save the presidency, the French presidency of the European Council. Emmanuel Macron has to accelerate a lot, and if it is Marine Le Pen, she will destroy everything which has been made before. And I think the French are intelligent in the way of seeing, well, if there's one thing sure after the Ukraine crisis is that we are stronger together. That's for sure. We make a united front. It was the big and it was the happy surprise of the crisis. We built robustness, we built inclusivity, we built stability, and because again, Olaf Scholz in front of Vladimir Putin is dependent.
The German leader.
The German chancellor is dependent on when it comes to gas, but less oil and a lot coal. France alone cannot speak to Russia by itself. Emmanuel Macron is legitimate because he is speaking on behalf of 26 other leaders of the European Union. And of course, we cannot avoid saying that the return of the United States in Europe obliges us to assess the fact that NATO is not a brain-dead organization. It has a revigorated as a military alliance. And I think someone who says that he wants to get to not confirm or let's say put aside this reality, Marine Le Pen, does not go in the direction of what the French want, to be protected and of course to have the certainty that the collective security of NATO would prevent any crazy action of Vladimir Putin in regards to the western part of Europe.